Hello, hello, hello. I am the Linux Mitch. Are you thinking of switching from Windows to Linux? Well, I have a few things to say about that. So let's get to it. If you've been watching my channel, you know I do a lot of videos about Arch Linux. I do some on Linux Mint. I've done some on MX Linux. I've also done some videos on Debian and Manjaro and so forth. And I do a lot of videos about uh, configuring my Linux machine in the terminal and a lot of videos about doing all kinds of stuff in the terminal in Arch Linux and other distributions as well. And recently, I did a video on installing Debian 12, which Debian 12 was released about a week ago, and I did a video on how to install it and configure it. And someone watched my channel and he decided to install Debian 12. And for some reason, his keyboard was doing some funny things and he couldn't get the sound going. And so I was thinking about it and I have some suggestions. Now, so if you've never used Linux before and you're running Windows, and as you can see, I'm in a virtual machine of Windows 10. Surprise, surprise. Anyways, like I was saying, if you're running Windows and you're thinking of switching to Linux and you've never used Linux, there are a lot of things to think about. Number one, how technical are you? Do you like your computer to just start and work? Or do you like monkeying around with the computer and messing around with it and trying to get things to work? Are you technical? Do you have an extra computer that you can play with? Have you ever used a virtual machine? So if you only have one computer and it's running Windows and you're using that computer for schoolwork or for your business or for entertainment and you need that computer, you probably should install Linux in a virtual machine. Or if you have an extra computer lying around, an extra old computer, install Linux in there. Play with it and see if you like it. Also, you can, if you only have one computer and you don't want to install a virtual machine and you don't know how to do that, you could install Linux on a thumb drive. You can install Linux on a thumb drive, run it, play with it, and then boot down and boot back into your Windows system without damaging anything in your Windows program. And I highly recommend installing a virtual machine. If you only have one computer, install a virtual machine and you can run Linux and play with it. And like right now, as you can see, I'm in Windows 10, but my computer is running Linux. I'm running Arch Linux on my computer, but this is a virtual machine of Windows 10. So what I would do is, if you only have one computer, I would open up your web browser. I'm going to open up Firefox and type in the search bar, VMware. Hit enter. This is it here. Let's click it on. Let's go to products, workstation player. That's the one you want. And click it on right here. You can easily run virtual machine on your Windows or Linux PC with VMware Workstation Player. Download for free. So what you're going to do is click this on and download it and install it on your Windows machine. And then you can use it. You can download an ISO of Linux, any Linux that you want, and install Linux on a virtual machine in your Windows computer for free. And you can play with Linux and see if you like it, and you don't have to wipe out your Windows hard drive and install something you may or may not like. Now, this VMware, I've used it. I'm not using it now at home, but I've used it at work. And I've used it at work to install virtual machines and everything works fine. And you can install Linux on it and it will work perfectly fine. And like I said, it's free. Now I'm just going to close my web browser. Now another thing you might want to do if you're running Windows 10 or 11, click on the Start menu and go to Task Manager. So I'm just opening up the Task Manager. Let's make it full screen. Now we're going to click on this Performance tab, the second tab. And in this virtual machine of Windows 10, I gave it 8 gigs of RAM and 4 processors. So you can see here, you can see in the right-hand corner, this virtual machine has 7.7 gigs of RAM. So I gave it 8 gigs of RAM, and I don't have any programs opened up in it right now. So down here, you can see I'm using 2.4 gigs of RAM to run Windows, and I still have 5.3 gigs of RAM available. Now, that's normal for Windows. My computer is at work. I'm running Windows 10 at work in a real bare metal computer, and with no programs open, I'm using about 2.5 gigs of RAM, sometimes 3 gigs of RAM. So this is using 2.3 gigs of RAM without any programs open. That's normal for Windows 10. Now, when I'm running Arch Linux on my machines, my Arch Linux with a window manager will run about 250 to 300 megabytes of RAM. Linux Mint will run about 800 megabytes of RAM. Debian will run about 800 to 1,000 megabytes of RAM. So that's the difference. So if your Windows 10 computer or your Windows 11 computer, if you have 8 gigs of RAM, you're going to have enough RAM to run VMware and a virtual machine of Linux, regardless of whether it be Arch or Linux Mint. So I'm just going to close the screen and I'm going to log out of Windows. So now I'm in a virtual machine of Linux Mint. It's fantastic. It works out of the box. Everything works. It'll take you about 10 minutes to install it. And maybe it might take about 20 minutes to do the updates. But it's fantastic. Everything is going to work out of the box. It's user-friendly. It's the most like Windows. It comes with a weather app. Now it's not installed by default, but you can easily go and get it. This is what it looks like here. It's easy to use. It comes with a start menu. It comes with Firefox installed. You can install Brave browser. It comes with a full Office suite. You can pin apps to the bottom. It comes with Rhythmbox, which is a music player. It comes with Celluloid, which is a video player. You can pin apps to the bottom. Let's just open up Office. So this is your text document, LibreOffice Writer. This is your spreadsheet, just like Excel, but it's LibreOffice Calc. Now you can go to the welcome screen. You can go to the welcome screen to first steps and set a dark theme, just like that. Now everything is dark. You have your file manager. You have your settings manager. All your settings are in here. Comes with a firewall. Put your password in. And you can see the firewall set. All you got to do is toggle it on. Over here would be off. This is on. Has all other kinds of settings. We have Firefox, comes installed. You can install Brave browser. Doesn't come installed by default. You have to go and get it. Here I have Brave browser here. And there we have Brave browser installed. It has an app store. Let's go to the app store. This is the app store. You have all kinds of apps that you can download and be sure that there's no malware or viruses in them because the devs check them out before they post them into their app store. You can do a search for apps here in this field here. Let's close that. Now let's go to HTOP. Let's open up HTOP. And I had all those programs opened up, and I'm running at 877 megabytes of RAM. So this is Linux Mint in a virtual machine. And I gave it 4 processors. I gave it 4 gigs of RAM. And I'm only using 877. Now, it's using a lot more than Arch Linux, and it's using a lot more than a window manager would use. But it's still using a lot less than Windows 10. A lot less. This is the App Store. It's telling me there's 19 updates available. So I'm going to do the updates. Let's do them. Just click this on, install updates. And it's installing a new Linux kernel as well. So I'm going to put my password in. I'm going to hit enter. And I'm going to let it do its update. And one of the beautiful things about Linux Mint is that, so when you're running Linux, most updates don't need a reboot. So when you're running Windows 10 or Windows 11, every time you do an update, you gotta reboot the system, and rebooting the system can take a long time because it just spins around that blue wheel of death. But Linux is different. So when you're running Linux, most of the time you don't have to do an update, except for when you're updating the kernel. But one of the beautiful things about Linux Mint is that if you need to do a reboot after an update, it's going to let you know. So anyways, I'm just going to pause the video while it's doing its update, and I'll be back. So it finished doing the update, took about 5 minutes, and you can see it's telling you a reboot is required. Now, like I said, most of the time you won't need to do a reboot when you do your update, except for when it's the kernel, but Linux Mint is always going to tell you when you need to do your reboot. And also, I forgot to mention, so when you need to do an update, this patch here is going to have a red dot in front of it. And when you don't need to do an update, it's going to be solid the way it is right now. So as you can see, if you click that on, your system is up to date. So anyways, we have to do a reboot. So I'm just going to go here. I'm going to go here, click this on. And you can see we have suspend, hibernate, restart, cancel, or shut down. I'm going to restart it. And it's just going to reboot. And while it's doing that, I'm going to pause the video. So it's rebooted. I'm just going to enter in my name. Oops. Click that on. Mensch. If I could spell it right. I put my password in. And I'm booting into my updated system. And there we are. So now that we've done a fresh reboot, an update and a fresh reboot, let's just see how much RAM we're using. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to go to administration, I'm going to go to HTOP. And now it's running at, and this is pretty good, it's running at 668 megabytes of RAM. Now, as if you remember at the beginning of the video, my Windows 10 virtual machine was running at 2.3 gigabytes of RAM. 2.3 gigs. This is running at 668 megabytes. And one more thing about Linux Mint I want to show you, and it doesn't come by default, you have to install it. But most new users to Linux probably won't want to use it, but I'm going to show it anyways. You can install a window manager, and I already installed it. Let's just log out. You can install it in the terminal or from the software center. So I'm going to click on this button, and I'm going to go into Awesome. And I'm going to click on my name, and I'm going to click on my password, and I'm going to hit enter. And this is the Awesome window manager. It's very lightweight. So let's go to HTOP. Now we're only running at 300 megabytes of RAM. Isn't that fantastic? 300 megabytes of RAM. And I can open up Firefox. I can open up Brave browser. And I'm going to log out of there. So let's get out. Let's go back to Cinnamon. Match. Password. And I'm going to open up Rhythmbox as the music player. Now this is a virtual machine. I don't have any music in here, but I use it and it works fantastic. Comes installed by default. And let's open up Celluloid. This is a video player. I've used it as well. It's fantastic. And it comes installed by default. So most of the things that are in here that I have installed in here, they all come installed by default. This Linux Mint, if you install it in a virtual machine or on a thumb drive or on your hard drive, it's going to work out of the box. It's going to have all these apps installed. It's going to work out of the box. I guarantee you, you won't have any trouble. And just one more thing before I go. I'm going to open up Firefox. I'm going to go to the Linux Mint homepage. And we're going to go to download. Now, Linux Mint has 4 types that you can download. So this one here is the recommended one. And this one it's based on Ubuntu, and it comes in 3 flavors. It comes cinnamon. And I'm just going to get rid of my face for a minute. So this is, let's scan back up for a sec. Comes with the Cinnamon Edition, which is the one I was showing you. I was showing you the Cinnamon Edition. The Cinnamon Edition is their flagship edition. And it uses a bit more RAM. It uses about 800 megabytes of RAM. And the next one is their Mate Edition. It's a little bit lighter, and the desktop looks a little different. And their 3rd edition is XFCE, which is the XFCE desktop environment, and it's even lighter. This probably ran about 400 to 500 megabytes of RAM. So if you have an old computer or small hardware, you might want to install this one. And then there's a 4th edition, which is there's a 4th edition. If you look on the far right, it's LMDE5, and that edition is based solely on Debian. It bypasses Ubuntu because the other 3 editions I showed you are based on Ubuntu. LMD5 is based solely on Debian, and they totally bypass Ubuntu. But that only comes in 1 flavor, and that's the cinnamon flavor, which is the one I showed you in this video. So that would be this one. Oops. Let's click it on. And this is it here. And actually, this is the one that I was showing you on the video. And this is based totally on Debian. Now, if you're not sure if you want to install Linux and you're hesitating, and you're thinking of installing it, and you're thinking of Linux Mint, you might want to wait another month. This Linux Mint one, the one that's recommended, that comes in the 3 flavors, this ISO is almost a year old. So if you use it, you're probably going to take maybe 10 minutes to install it, but it's going to take probably 20 minutes to a half an hour to do the updates. Now they're coming out with a new ISO sometime in July. And if you install your new system from a brand new ISO, that will also probably take about 5 to 10 minutes to install. But the updates, there might not be any updates to do, or if there are, there'll only be a few updates to do, and the updates probably won't take more than 5 minutes. Plus, the new ISO is going to have a lot of new features on it. There's going to be new features, bugs that were fixed, and so forth. So you might want to wait. Then a month after that, so that's going to be sometime in July. And a month after that, this one here, LMDE, is going to come out with a new ISO, which again will mean less updates to do after the installation and more bug fixes and new features. So like I said, this and the 3 flavors are going to come out with the new ISO in July, and maybe about a month later, this new ISO will come out. So you might want to wait. Now, you don't have to, but you might want to. So I just thought I'd mention that. So I'm going to close my web browser. I do love my weather app. So in this video, I talked about the benefits of moving from Windows 10 to Linux, the downfalls, and the best way to go about it. And I also showed you, in my opinion, the best Linux distribution for a person that's brand new to Linux, that's moving from Windows, and that is Linux Mint. And I gave you a nice tour of Linux Mint. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching. I am the Linux Mensch.